Hare Krishna. I'm going to ask you a question right off the back. Did you recognize who was singing in the soundtrack?
Absolutely. That was my wife's lovely voice.
Yes, your better half. Great. Hare Krishna. Vanchakalpa Tribhischa Kripasindhibhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Welcome to our discussion of compassionate communication today. Our guest speaker this evening is Ghanashyam Das. Before joining the Bhakti Center in New York City, where he lived as a brahmachari for 11 years, Ghanashyam Das obtained a degree in classical piano. During his time at the Bhakti Center, along with his studying various Vedic literatures and practicing the path of Bhakti, he served as a university chaplain at both Columbia University and NYU. He's the co-founder of End of Life Matters, a Bhakti Center social initiative, which offers care and support to people at their last stages of life. Incidentally, he is also a member of the End of Life team in Alachua, and we're very pleased to have him on that team. After transitioning to the Grihastha ashram, he worked as a palliative care chaplain at New York Presbyterian Hospital for 6 years. He now lives with his wife, Bhakti Lata Devi, in Alachua and works as a hospice chaplain in Alachua County. Dear audience, we will be taking questions after each section and at the end. So please type in your questions in the comments, or you can ask them personally on Zoom. Welcome, Ghanashyam Prabhu. Nice to have you this evening. Please tell.
Thank you so much.
Yes, very nice to have you. Please tell me, what is compassionate communication and how does it differ from our normal mode of communication?
Thank you so much for this opportunity. It's grateful to be with all of you and to go to explore this topic together, go deeper into it. And just wanted to start by just offering some prayers. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashachara Shatana Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasade Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So grateful to be with all of you and to go deeper into this topic, compassionate communication. I first just wanted to say something about the deeper significance of communication. You know, one thing is cooperation. Even that is a little difficult to cooperate, right? For a family to cooperate, co-workers. But a step higher than cooperation is communication, where you're actually working through challenges, differences, you know, you're actually exchanging. And so there's cooperation. Somehow you can just make it work. You cooperate with the team. But then to communicate these exchanges that take place and working through difficulties or differences, that's a step higher. So, and it's also more than just using the right words, right? Communicating, we usually think of words. But we can also see communication on a deeper level, again, means to be in communion with the other person. To be, like we have the word, community, communion, this connection. It's sometimes useful to look at the original meaning of a word. It's a nice place to start, right? So we're talking about communication. So the original meaning, communicare, which means to share or to connect or to relate or to exchange. So when we talk about communication, in essence, we're talking about the art of relating. We're talking about relationship. And this is one way of determining our spiritual advancement, right? Our capacity to relate and also the quality of our relating. If we look at the relationships, for example, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, you know, when we hear about those relationships between Lord Chaitanya and his devotees, just the richness of the exchanges, the beauty, the purity, the sensitivity of those exchanges. It's so beautiful. You know, the giving and the receiving. You know, Rupa Goswami says, Satvidam Priti Lakshanam, that there are 6 symptoms of love shared between devotees. Actually, there's just 3 items, but he says there's 6 symptoms because relationship means to be both the giver and the receiver, to know how to give and also how to receive. So this is the deeper level of communication. It's so much more than just, you know, cooperating or just using the right words, but it's a real connection. How do we really connect to a person? And then from there are different ways communication takes place. But it's first of all this communion with another person. So to really communicate, it's dependent on this communion, this union. Right? I was trained as a chaplain, and of course they have this understanding as well. For my training, I remember the word that they use when you're visiting patients or people who are ill or perhaps dying, or their families. At least the way I was trained, they use the word attunement. The first thing that's necessary is that you attune to the person. I remember I went to see one pretty young man who was passing away. He was in his, you know, early 40s. And, you know, there was always so many people with him. He had a big family. And I remember, like, you know, going there, and so many people were there. This was in a hospital. So many visitors, so many friends, everybody just loved him, supported him. And, you know, there was always a big crowd in the room, gifts, balloons. You know, it was very sad, but at the same time, there's a lot of support. And I asked him one day how he was doing, you know, and he said that I'm feeling so lonely. And it caught me off guard a little bit because I didn't expect that, because I always see such a full room, so many friends, so many visitors. And the first time he said that, I don't know what I said. I think I just said, you know, I'm sorry you're feeling that or whatever. But when I went home and I was going to see him again the next day, I was reflecting at, you know, yeah, sometimes loneliness. I was remembering a time where I felt lonely in my life. And I really kind of recalled that, brought that back into my own heart. And I remember how awful it was. And, you know, I went to see him the next day, and I was thinking, yeah, look, this person is actually dying. Everyone around him was alive and living and doing things, and how lonely it is to be sick, the one who's sick. Loneliness in your sickness, loneliness in the one who's dying, feeling that. And so all of this I was feeling. You know, the first time he mentioned it, I felt nothing. I just kind of moved on the conversation. But because I started to reflect on actually what he was going through, and sometimes when many people are around, the loneliness is even more acute because you think you're supposed to be fulfilled because so many people are around. You feel the company, but no, if you don't, it's even more strong how you feel that, the pain of loneliness. So with all of that, all of those feelings within myself, I just went to him the next day and I sat down and I said, it's so painful to be lonely. And he kind of just looked up and was surprised I said that, because it had nothing to do, he wasn't expecting something that comment. It was from the day before. And I said, it can really sting to feel lonely. And as soon as I said that, just all these tears came down from his eyes, and he cried and he cried and he cried, and it went on for minutes. And he cried so much that he became kind of exhausted and fell asleep a little bit from the exhaustion of just, but he let so much out. And then he just opened his eyes, and I was still there, you know, sitting with him. I was just being patient and waiting, and he said, thank you. And And I thought, wow, the communication, what I said was very little. I said a few words. I said 4 words. I said, loneliness can really sting. 4 words. But because I was so attuned to his loneliness, I was feeling the pain of it myself. There was a kind of energetic connection, and I was really feeling it. I remembered a time of feeling it myself, and kind of brought that to see him. And so I really did mean it. I really did feel it when I said those words, and the impact that had. Just imagine if you're not there with a person, but you're speaking certain words. You're not really there, but you speak the right words, the impact will be much less. So it's just the power of, communication we're talking about, but communion first, connect. First get to that place with a person and then speak. And you'll be surprised, you'll have the intelligence to speak better than if you're just trying to think of the right thing to say. When someone's going through something. But even Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he says in one place, Apane na kale dharma, shikana na yai, Gita Siddhanta Gita Bhagavata Gai. He says, unless one is sincerely practicing devotional service, his speaking it to others will have no power. Unless one somehow is sincerely following and practicing, if they try to speak, we speak so many things to each other. We give each other instructions and advice, but if there's a contradiction within myself, when I speak those words, they may have very little power or no power. So the inner contradictions within our own consciousness and the words we speak and who we are and our being, this makes our influence very weak, and it makes our connection weak. We know this also with children. Raising children. I haven't raised children myself, but I've heard a lot about this, and it makes a lot of sense to me. And we speak so many things to them. We want them to be a certain way. We instruct it. But really, what gets transmitted to a child? It's not so much the words. What actually gets transmitted from the parent to the child? They may not even understand words. They may be very, very small children. What gets transmitted is your being. Your state of consciousness gets transmitted and enters into a child, enters into a person. And so then this is this is like a deeper way of seeing communication. And it's important because we want to know actually what will help us be able to communicate in this very meaningful and powerful way. There's a science to it that's given also in the Bhagavatam. Actually, a very interesting thing. When you speak words, there's a sound, right? There's the audible sound. That's considered to be the last stage in a fourfold process. What that means is the words, as they come out of my mouth and you hear them, 3 other things happen first within me. Right? First, there's a vibration in the pran. And then there's a vibration in the mind, the manas. And then there's a vibration in the buddhi, the intelligence. And then the audible sound comes out. That's amazing, right? Because I'm speaking so quickly right now. But all of this is happening first. And the idea is that if there's no harmony there, my words may say something. I may be sitting with a person and say all the right things, but in my mind I may be thinking, I really dislike this person. I'm only doing it for this reason. And because there's a discrepancy between the subtle body and then the words that come out, there's no real communication. There's no real communion. So, it's so amazing, this, this information that's there, in Vedic literature, that when you speak and the sound comes out, there's been all these other things that have already happened that preceded the actual audible sound. And these are happening within the pran, within the mind, within the buddhi, and then it comes out as sound. So I like to get into the science of it, because when I can really see the science of what's happening, it somehow, it gives me more faith, and it gives me an understanding of these things, communication, and how it actually works. So I'll pause for a second. That's a little groundwork of this idea of communication, seeing it in a deeper way. And then I want to talk about next what stands in the way of this inner harmony within ourselves, or in other words, what stands in the way of true communication and how we deal with that. But this is just a little of the science of what, an understanding of what deeper communication is and means, according to some points in our scripture. Anything right now concerning this, what I've shared so far about communication before we go forward?
So the people on Zoom can just unmute themselves and speak themselves. But I'm so impressed by what you said, that it's communication is not just words. It has to come from the heart, and there has to be communion. There has to be some connection in order for real communication to take place. Otherwise, it seems so superficial. And people are not affected by it, like that example you gave of the gentleman who was feeling lonely in a crowd.
Yeah, he mentioned his loneliness, and I just totally didn't get it at first. But I reflected, and then I prepared myself. Sometimes we have to do that when we're going to have communication with somebody. We prepare ourselves. Okay, let me really enter their world for a moment. They're feeling this way. I've surely felt that way before. Let me remember what it feels like before I start connecting to this person and speaking.
Yes. Thank you.
Sure. And there's this saying also. I think it's from Greek philosophy, but that it's very simple, but it's always helped me with connecting to people. The saying is, "Nothing human is alien, and I am human." I forget who said that. But in essence, what that means is that whatever comes out of a human being, it's nothing alien. We should be able to relate to it. If someone is feeling fear, well, surely I've felt fear. If someone is feeling loneliness, if someone is feeling anger, if someone feels like, if someone is thinking about suicide, right? Recently, there was a presentation that we did, end of life, here in Alachua about suicide. Can we relate to that? Is there a way where we can actually understand a person who does something or is thinking about doing something like that? We surely can, right? Because sometimes you ever have a bad day, a really bad day, and you just hope that let this day end. Or you just want to go to sleep and forget about what happened. So that is also, on a micro scale, it's this thing of just let it end. I can't take anymore. Right? So even when someone is experiencing something, we think, I can't relate to that. That's just beyond me. I never felt that. No, we felt it all. And nothing that comes out of any human being is something alien or strange. We're also human beings. And there is a place, if we're willing, we can be able to relate to everything. Usually we're not willing. That's the problem. When we think that's so different than me, I'm not like that. But actually,
yes. The willingness is really important. What you just said, that willingness has to be there.
Yeah. Okay. So
isn't this willingness, isn't it the same, like similar, perhaps not the same, but similar to being non-judgmental? Because if you have a judgment about the person that you're communicating with, you can't have this connection, right?
Yeah, that's definitely something that blocks the way of true commitment, because you're still, you're comparing and judging. You're not attuned. You're not actually entering that person's world. Because, you see, when you actually enter a person's world and truly try to understand, what that communicates is a kind of warmth. The person starts to feel they appreciate that. They feel understood, and that actually helps them get over something they may be going through, or it helps them to be able now to listen to you. The communication again is always both ways, giving and receiving. So, but it's hard to do because we have this thing called false ego, and the false ego likes to judge. It's comparing, comparison. What does that have to do with the connection? Is the relationship about making a connection and helping each other, or is it about I'm better, I'm judging you, we judge because we want to feel superior often. So you're right, there's definitely a connection. That willingness is the first big step. Let me be willing to actually connect first as the primary point. Anything else? Thank you. So what stands in the way of this good communication? We're already talking about some of it. And primarily two things stand in the way. And what are those two things? Communication in the mode of passion and communication in the mode of ignorance. Because what is yoga? Patanjali explains in his Yoga Sutras that what is yoga? Yoga means two things. Raising yourself to the mode of goodness, that's one step. And then from goodness to transcendence. This is how he puts it. This is how he defines what yoga actually means. Two things. So in other words, an understanding of the three modes of nature. What is passionate communication? What does that create? What is ignorant communication? What does that create? And then you start to see the value of something called communication in the mode of goodness. You start to try to bring yourself to that, to understand it, to apply it. And then from there, that's not the end of it either. Then from there's a possibility of something else, which is, in our stage, it's hard to even fathom the deeper meaning of spiritual communication. Spiritual compassion. That is a whole other category. But the first step is to understand communication in the mode of goodness and to start to apply it for the purpose of this other step that comes after. A spiritual possibility that opens up. So there's a nice verse I found that I wanted to read from the Bhagavatam. This is from the 11th canto. It says, until one revives one's direct knowledge of the spirit soul and drives away the illusory identification with the three modes of nature, one must cultivate those things in the mode of goodness. So until one is able to awaken the truth, to realize that they're actually a spiritual being. If that's not yet awakened, then one must cultivate things in the mode of goodness, communication in the mode of goodness. And by the cultivation of goodness, it's kind of, it enlightens us, it gives light, we see more, we understand more. And then it says, by the cultivation of transcendence, one can then free oneself even from the mode of goodness. So again, spiritual life is always going to mean these two things. There needs to be an understanding of the modes of nature. And it's interesting because even modern psychology and psychiatrists, they point out, this is our language, the modes of nature, the three modes, but it's very valuable to study because it all comes up and shows up in all of these modern, methods. What is passionate communication? That means something. What is communication in the mode of ignorance? What do you think, right? When you hear about someone who's speaking, let's say under the influence of the mode of passion, what kind of speaking would that be? What are some words that would be, we could say, speaking in the mode of passion? What would it be like?
It'd be very animated.
Okay. There's an energy.
He would probably be angry and arrogant and maybe boastful and taking a superior position. I don't know, maybe this what I'm saying is the mixture of passion and ignorance. passion is actually easier to, because the mode of passion is so much activity. Mode of ignorance, I don't know exactly what the mode of ignorance, indifference perhaps.
Yeah. Some people on Zoom have said interrupting, trying to fix people's problems, or forceful.
Yeah, there's a force in it, and there's a forcing in it, that you want to communicate, you want to force something, right, onto another person. You want to be above the other person. Again, like all these things we're saying are true. You know, speaking in the mode of, and also there's listening in the mode of passion, right? Having an agenda. That's also mentioned just now, and that's true. Yeah, you have an agenda, because mode of passion means you're really out for your own fruits. There's your own motive for it. You want to be understood. You want to be acknowledged. You want someone to adapt to you, but are we willing to also adapt to the other? And that's difficult when one's in the mode of passion. So the interesting thing is that in the material world, what's keeping the material world beating? What is the heartbeat of material world and material consciousness? It's the back and forth between the mode of passion and the mode of ignorance. The mode of passion and the mode of ignorance. This is like the heartbeat. It keeps material consciousness going and also the material world going. Right? Like Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and Srila Prabhupada would also speak about, what is this world? It is the cheaters and the cheated. Now, to be a cheater means what? Mode of passion. Trying to exploit another. Again, from maybe a position that's above. You're trying to cheat or exploit another. And then to be cheated is the mode of ignorance. Right? I was listening to a class by Prabhupada recently, and it was very interesting. He said, to have some important position and to cheat or exploit another, that is the greatest sin. And then he said, but to be cheated, that is also a fault. It was interesting the way it's put. You know, to the cheaters and the cheated. I think it was Eleanor Roosevelt. She has this amazing quote that impacted me when I heard it. Reminded me of this idea of Prabhupada saying, to be cheated is also a fault. But she said, to be exploited by another person is not possible unless there's something within us that consents to be exploited. Something in us allows for it. It's, of course, it's a very, it takes a very deep insight to come to this, but it shows that somehow to be exploited, to be cheated, one can also look into their heart and see what's causing that. You know, so Prabhupada says, though, to be the cheater is a great sin. To be cheated, that is also a fault. That's how he put it. But anyway, this is the tragedy of human interaction, because this is what happens. And we alternate from the mode of passion to the mode of ignorance to the mode of passion. And they feed each other. They reinforce each other. They give birth to one another, right? What do I mean by that? How does this work if we again consider communication? If one communicates too passionately, what does that do? That invokes a withdrawal from the other person, which is mode of ignorance, right? If someone is too forceful with you, right, then oftentimes this causes the door to close, or the door of communication closes, that I want nothing to do with this person, right? Or one, you know, then again, communication in the mode of ignorance is a kind of withdrawal or removal, isolation, not willing to risk, to be honest or to be vulnerable. You just kind of withdraw, right? And a person who's very passionate, say there's two people, it invokes that. And vice versa. If someone is not really communicating, not wanting, not caring about it, what does that do? That creates passion in the other person, because they get frustrated, they get angry. Just tell me let's talk about this, you know? And they become forceful. So in this way, passion and ignorance, it's like this cycle. It goes round and round. And it feeds the other and invokes the other. So if you're in the mode of passion in a situation of communication, that will invoke ignorance in others. And if others can also, with their ignorance, can invoke passion in another.
I have a question here. I wonder, you are explaining communication, drawing from the three modes of material nature, which, I'm also devotee, and, I understand it fully well. But then there are people who are very good at communication. They have no idea about the modes of material nature. There are many people who are much better than many devotees in communication.
Absolutely. There's no doubt about that. Yes, because these are material principles. The modes of nature are material realities. So whatever words or language you want to use to describe it, you know how modern psychologists they talk about fight and flight in communication. So what is fight? It is passion. What is flight? You remove yourself. That is ignorance. So yes. Everyone can come up, whatever words are used are fine. But as devotees, we bring it back to understanding that these are actually influences within the material creation. And what's more powerful, some understanding that we have that most of those people do not have, is that these are influences passing through us. It's not really us. You see? Like, it's like an energy passing through that we identify with. And this is where it gets more profound from the devotee's knowledge of more full picture, that these are material modes of nature. And the goal also is not just good communication. That's necessary and important for something else. For what? For yoga, for that you connect again to yourself, your true self. You connect to others truly. You connect to God. And so, yeah, the language is not so important. So they don't know about this our way of speaking, the three modes of nature, but it still shows up, and they call it something else. And they still describe it in their language. They talk about aggressive communication. Again, what is that? It's the mode of passion. Over aggressive, over anxious. So we immediately think, oh, this is all in the category of the mode of passion. So it's however it's said, we're all saying the same thing, because these are material laws that are being discovered by people who are non-devotees. Non-devotees can discover material laws, and they can learn them very well and also be superior to devotees in their practice and application of them. So that's all possible. But the devotees, because we're guided by pure devotees, we also know the ultimate, where's this ultimately going? What is spiritual compassion? Now, who can say something about that? Who can say something about spiritual communication? That you won't find in so many places. You can talk about the material mode of goodness communication, and that's very healthy and important. But who speaks about spiritual communication? So there's some of the dynamics, I think, with us and with others and the points of view.
So can you elaborate a little bit? Do you mind? Maybe you have certain things you want to go through, but this with the spiritual communication.
We're getting there.
We got Okay.
Yeah. For now, the best thing we can do is look within our own hearts and see when passion is active, when the influence of when the influence of ignorance is there, and then try to understand goodness. Because the more we actually bring our being into the mode of goodness, the more we can actually realize what spiritual compassion is, and not just talk about it and hope for it one day. But we have to bring our being into the mode of goodness, so things get very clear within us, and then we start to get inspired by that possibility and long for it.
Priya Prabhu, did you want to ask something or make a comment?
I missed the first 15 minutes and I'm a little hesitant to say anything at this point. I'm just writing down everything he's saying. It's really good.
Okay. What about somebody who's passive? in response to somebody who is passionately saying something, what would you say about that?
Yeah, and the passivity again is what? It's the mode of ignorance, right? To be totally passive, to just shrink back. What will communication be if we do that? Right? So whether in the mode of passion or ignorance, both, there needs to be an understanding of what is goodness communication. What is the mode of goodness? And that's where I want to go now. And so hopefully maybe if we look at some, really try to get a feel for what that means and start to try to apply it. So if someone has this tendency towards passivity in communication, then what is good mode of goodness communication? Assertiveness. Not aggressiveness, but let me be assertive. Let me also speak clearly and honestly about what's important to me. So that brings one to another mode of communication. We start to get a feel for that. We start to get a taste of that. And we start to feel better about ourselves. We start to get a little confidence in ourselves. All of these things are the results of acting in the mode of goodness. And this will help. So from all of you also, maybe, and you can even type in words if you want, but when you think of communication in the mode of goodness, throw out some words of what that may mean in communication. What does it look like? Say, what are some key words that would really identify that this is the mode of goodness? This is very good, healthy communication. Think about exchanges with others and listening. Yeah. That's a big one. We were talking a little bit about that, to be able to actually listen to the other person, which is like a practice of, to listen to another is a practice of self-denial, right? It's to deny yourself and to enter the world of the other person. This is like a sacrifice. It's not an easy thing to do. If we think we automatically know how to listen, that's not a good starting point. We should think, I don't know how to listen. I'm going to make a real effort now to actually listen attentively and also enter the world of the other person. That's not an easy thing. So listening, good listening.
Others have said authentic and presence.
Yeah, presence. Again, that is a kind of to be awake through the whole process, to be attentive, to be present. Again, not so easy, right? We fall asleep. And what do we fall asleep into? The mode of passion and ignorance. See that? The lower modes, the identification is we're submerged. When the lower the mode goes, the more the identification is actually submerged in that mode. And so there's no wakefulness, there's no presence, there's no alert. And then mode of goodness, to start to go in that direction, more and more we're waking up. We're more and more present. And here's another value of being a devotee and understanding these things, whereas we understand mode of goodness, to enter the mode of goodness, to really live it, there's a whole lifestyle that has to be adopted. Not that you just try to do it. What do you eat? What about eating, sleeping? What about, what you're putting in, what you're hearing? So we understand to really be in the mode of goodness, all these things have to be it's a lifestyle change. It's not just an effort that you try to make by reading some books. So again, this is the value of what we have in understanding the mode of goodness and what's necessary to actually be in that mode. Anyone else? Another key word maybe for communication in the mode of goodness?
Mahavishnu Priya says caring, kindness.
Caring, to actually care.
Patience.
Kindness. Patience, right? These are all challenging, right? Yeah.
Practicing humility also. Mahavishnu Priya says.
Yeah. And again, to listen is to be humble, because it means to put your ego aside and to really just try to listen and hear to the other person. Otherwise most of our responses, if you notice when people are communicating or talking, a lot of our responses to the other person, again, is, I go see many patients or many people with my work, and they're going through something, and my job is to kind of be there for them, to support them, right, to serve them. But when they say something, a lot of times my response is more about me, you know, to really be caring and to enter the world and to listen to the other person. It's all about them. To make that switch or that shift really takes a conscious effort. Non-judgmental. Yeah, absolutely. And like, you know, what about taking responsibility? So you're having say there's an issue with somebody, right? Mode of goodness communication requires that we also take responsibility. You know, if there's some problem or some miscommunication, the humility to take the responsibility to express that. Right? That's also important. But when you think of mode of goodness, you think responsible, clear, assertive, kind, patient. So, you know, it's hard to be all these things in the moment, but if we talk about it, if we try to bring it into our life, if we try to apply it, we'll get a little taste and experience of it, and we'll see the value of it. I was with, in terms of this idea of taking responsibility, I have a story about that, which just kind of amazed me. I received an email recently from a young woman that she, you know, this is when I was in New York, and I would visit also a psychiatric hospital. And everybody on this unit had major depressive disorder. So you just imagine. And, you know, actually the way this young lady described it to me was so like chilling for me, because she said, it's not that I'm just an unhappy person. People don't really understand what depression is. It's not that I'm just unhappy. But she said, I feel like my mind can't even produce a positive thought. And I thought that, wow, you know, to be so much in that, to be locked in like that. So what I noticed on this unit, this is just something I noticed that was very enlightening for me. There was a pattern that some people were really locked in to that depression. And then some people, it was very few, and especially this one woman who I met who sent me this letter, and she was just, you know, reaching out to me to say thank you, and our conversations were so important. She's telling me what she's doing now. She got out of the hospital. She's working on a farm in South Carolina. She's keeping a journal, and she's like really doing well right now, and she just wanted to thank me for our interactions. But how did she get from that very deep, dark place of depression? How did she get out? I was amazed at what she shared, because one day I went to see her, and she said, I'm getting this realization, she told me. And I said, what's that? She said, I know now that I'm choosing to be depressed.
Wow, that's big.
And this is amazing, because this is like a, you know, there's controversy about this topic, by the way, like a disease. It's actually a disease, you know, and it's a disorder. But she was saying that actually I'm having the realization that I'm choosing this. And I said, well, why would you do that? And without missing a beat, she said, with such intensity, she said, because I want to get back at my mother and father for what they did to me. And so she actually had like an immediate answer. She knew the link. And she was saying, I'm choosing this to be like this because I want my parents to suffer. You know, and then we talked about, well, what does it mean now that you realize this thing? What can we do to kind of face it and deal with it? And we had so many discussions, but I was amazed that somebody could own that. You know, like we make little mistakes and we don't even want to own that. But this young lady is sitting there owning this deep state of depression that she's in, when she could be just saying, well, this has happened to me because of this and these people, and I'm just been cursed, or I'm unlucky, whatever it may be. And the people who start to take ownership, those are the one, a little light starts to come. and they start to see a little bit, there's a little bit more room starts to come, and they start to see other possibilities. But if we're actually pointing at others and blaming others, and we're stuck in that, then we stay in a kind of darkness. So the pattern I noticed on this unit, if there's a little openness to exploring how I also, in maybe some way, maybe contributing to this, or I have some power to do something about it, then in my experience, those were the few, the rare few on this unit, at least that I was working on, that were starting to lift their heads out of it and trying to make changes. So it just shows the power. Like, so when we have a little problem with somebody or some break, some difficulty in communication, mode of goodness means we take ownership, how I've contributed to this problem. Even if maybe the reality is the other person was 80% responsible and I was 20. That's sometimes true, right? But still, my consciousness is, let me look at that 20. How did I create this problem? How did I contribute? This is mode of goodness communication too. And if you own that and express it, the other person will be so humbled by your attempt to look at your own heart, and they'll also be encouraged to look at their own heart. And if you have two people who are doing that have the willingness to see how they're, contributing to some breakdown in communication, then that relationship will last and be very, very powerful. So that's really like a key for both to have the willingness to search their own involvement in the issue, search what their own creation was in this interaction. If that's there in a relationship between two people, between two groups, then surely one is connecting to the mode of goodness and experiencing the value of it. Any thoughts before we move on? Or comments or questions?
I do have some thoughts. What's your opinion? Because my mind gets a little agitated when you're talking about depression. The reason for that is that I have suffered major depressions in my life.
Yeah.
And so do you really think that this is something that you, just by your awareness, can find yourself a way out of? Because in my experience, this has more to do like physically.
Right.
To me, it has been like a subtle physical ailment that I haven't been able to think myself positive, because it's just like if you have a disease on your physical body, you can do something, but if you have something, some wounds in your mind or subtle body, it can manifest as this depression, and it's not necessarily that I have to own up to my own responsibility on why I'm depressed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it can get to a point where it's really like just something that we just need healing from. And we're not like in this space of like, okay, how am I contributing? Maybe those questions are not possible. But there is a possibility for some people to start to explore that possibility and open up to it and just see, like I was saying, like when on this particular, everybody on this unit I'm giving the example of one lady after I worked on this unit for 2 years, where I saw this example of her going there and being at a stage where she could go there and explore the possibility of it. And again, it doesn't take away that something has happened to me. It's not that and many times other people are responsible and so forth, but so we have to be where we are, and a lot of people, the only thing that really helps in that state of, it could be like a state that a person is really strongly connected to and stuck in. And so it's not that, the advice here is, well, get out of it, you caused it, nothing like that. But the idea is that, especially as devotees, that what we do, how we support such a person is simply just by love and kindness and healing. Just a gradual healing, and that can also help a person. But yeah, sometimes it can get to the point where, like you said, if there's, you have some wound that's there. But can a wound heal? Surely you're not, that's not going to be with you eternally. And what's the way to start to heal? So these are some possibilities. Maybe the healing just comes from the love of others, and you're so moved by that you start to open up again. Maybe the healing comes from some exploring within your own mind of causes. What are some causes? Let me explore that. So surely it's possible to overcome it. Now, it may not be, quick or fast or one life or two life or three lives, but definitely it's possible to overcome it. Because it's not us ultimately. We're spiritual beings, and that's that's the truth. So I don't know if that was helpful. So, but I appreciate you sharing where you're coming from, and I totally understand it. It was a very extreme example I gave, and it was one person I've experienced with that disorder in 2 years of working with lots of people who have that disorder. And so I definitely understand what you're saying, and I know the reality of it as well. And I feel
Yeah,
like
I just wanted to see where you stand. Do you think that depression can be like we are diverting a little bit from the topic of compassionate communication. I hope you bear with me. Is that okay?
Yeah, I'm happy also to talk with you more later, perhaps.
Okay.
And,
okay.
Yeah. And yeah, we can go more into it, and I can share. I'd be happy to do that. So we can save that.
Okay.
But thank you for that. It's really important, and I'm glad you mentioned it. And I knew it had controversy around it. And
yeah,
some people will.
It does.
Yeah, it does, and I understand why. And
okay.
at the same time, from the spiritual perspective, everything material can be overcome, and but you have to take the time factor out of that. So if you say, well, it's not happening, well, yeah, I have to take the time factor out and see how the healing actually takes place, and and then it actually is possible. Anyway, well, we can speak more. So I want to now move from mode of goodness to, as we mentioned that verse in the beginning, how mode of goodness is the first thing. Yoga means raising yourself to the mode of goodness, and then understanding what it means to shift from goodness to transcendence. And then communication is very different. It might be surprising what communication is like when you're actually in that state of consciousness. It may be surprising what it looks like. So when a person starts to see how the modes of nature are acting within themselves, it's better to look at the modes of nature within oneself than outside of oneself. They're happening within us. Suddenly I'm passionate, or I have a tendency to want to avoid, to fly away. As we said, fight, flight, right? But when one starts to see that these things are happening, one starts to become interested in what is goodness. And because we've been guided by pure devotees, we also understand that goodness, it's the goal of someone who's on material consciousness. Their highest goal is the mode of goodness. But devotees also understand that we can't sustain that mode of goodness in the material world. It can't be sustained. And actually, it always has passion and ignorance also within it. We learn this from the Gita, that goodness always contains passion. And if you notice, even when someone fights for some good cause in this world, say they have some ideal they want to fight for, and it really is good, and it will be helpful, and it will be beneficial. But what usually happens is that they want it to manifest in the world, and it creates a kind of frustration and an impatience, and it creates, then you start to want to force it on people, which is now we're sinking back down to the mode of passion. You see, so you have some good idea in this world. I want to fight for this, I want to fight to that. And then you're upset that others aren't also fighting for it, or others aren't doing it. And we become angry. And then we want to force our opinion, our good idea on another. And in this way, a devotee has a realization that even the mode of goodness, it is very healthy, it is very positive, but it's not liberating. Is there such a thing as liberating relationships? Is there such a thing as liberating communication? Imagine that, where you're communicating, and by the communication, people are actually coming to their highest potential, which is the spiritual level. So it's not that the modes of nature, it's not that you become more and more healthy, and then one day you wake up and you're a transcendental divine being. It doesn't happen like that. There's a verse, Aprakrita vastu nahi prakrita gochara. Lord Chaitanya says that the material modes, the material nature, and the spiritual nature never meet. They don't touch. So it's not that by becoming more and more good, more and more healthy, suddenly you're divine. No, something else still has to happen. From the mode of goodness, it doesn't automatically flow and you become transcendental, right? I'll read a verse, 2 verses I wanted to read from the Gita so we see what's necessary after spending some time in cultivating the mode of goodness. So Krishna says, this is 7th chapter, 13th verse. He says, deluded by the 3 modes, goodness, passion, and ignorance, the whole world does not know me, who am above the modes and inexhaustible. So even in the mode of goodness, a very healthy state of living and life, Krishna says here, that person is deluded still and does not know me. So what's necessary? In the next verse, 14, he says, this divine energy of mind consisting of the 3 modes of nature is difficult to overcome, but those who have surrendered unto me can cross beyond it. So the transition from the mode of goodness to transcendence is this thing, this very profound thing called surrender. Surrender to God. And we practice it again and again, but it's very deep, it's very profound what it actually means. When that from the mode of goodness is a very favorable platform to start to understand what surrender actually means, and then surrendering the heart to God. And then when that happens, when one actually surrenders, and for us it's a practice, so we do it in different moments, just like being attentive or something. Even that is a surrender. Let me give my attention to hearing. Let me chant nicely. Let me chant with attention. This is a kind of surrender. So it's a process, it's a practice. And then there comes a time where it actually takes place, where your heart, yourself, your soul is surrendered. And then what takes place at that time is that the Lord's divine energy, his divine compassion enters into the surrendered heart of the devotee and transforms us. And then communication and compassion, then it may look very different than what we expect. Just like Srila Prabhupada, sometimes like with his words, right? First of all, you can say, well, his English maybe wasn't so perfect, or his words were harsh sometimes. And we think, well, what happened to the compassion, Because actually we're viewing it materially. We think material mode of goodness is the highest. And we're saying, well, Prabhupada is not, he's not learning, he doesn't know all of these, the understanding of goodness, compassion, or whatever it may be. Looking at it from a material point of view, sometimes that can be said, but actually because we can't even fathom spiritual compassion. It's no longer a private emotion. It's actually more like a force, a radiant force of God that enters the heart of a person, and they're completely driven by everything they do, everything they say. What's happening in the heart is this compassion for all living beings, and it will come out in different ways. Sometimes it'll be hard like a thunderbolt. Lord Chaitanya is glorified in that way. Sometimes soft like a rose. And we'll misunderstand. We'll think, oh, Prabhupada was so nice here, but here he became very heavy. Well, we don't see how it actually works. This is when the Lord's compassion is actually within a person, and one is driven by that, it will take many different forms under many different circumstances. But it's actually God's compassion within a person. Imagine how powerful that is. So you see a person like Srila Prabhupada who's actually connected to that. It's not a private emotion that you try to manifest. I'm going to try to be compassionate. It's not like that. It's actually something that overtakes you. You become an instrument of the Lord's compassion. And you see the suffering of others, and you feel that very painfully in your heart. And you want to do everything. You're so determined and so moved to serve others compassionately and to communicate, to find the words somehow. Like Prabhupada prayed on the Jaladuta, please give me the suitable words. My longing is to help everyone return to you, Krishna. But I don't know what to say. I don't know how to do it. Please give me the words. Let my words be impactful. That surrendered heart, but the drive of compassion is there. And then comes the communication. And you're going to figure out the communication because the compassion, the desire to serve is so strong. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and we'll end with this and see if there are maybe a few comments or questions, but Bhaktivinoda Thakur also explains this. When love of God awakens within the soul, then when that love of God is directed towards others, it takes the form of compassion. So the compassion of a pure devotee is another form of their love of God, and that's a state of consciousness. And then the result of that drive and that compassion is communication, because you want to share it. You want to uplift others to the highest level possible, the spiritual level. And so it becomes effective communication. You know, in the sound vibration of a pure devotee, everything is urging the person to surrender. That's what's in the sound vibration, whatever they're saying, because it's so much a part of their being that they see the need, the realization of the need for all living beings to be in that state, that whatever they say, whatever they do, it's somehow urging us on to, yes, I should also surrender. That's what we should feel when we hear the pure sound vibration of a pure devotee. I remember first reading Bhagavad Gita, and this kind of effect was there, that I felt like everything, it was like I was enjoying reading it, but I was also like, oh no, now I have to become vegetarian. Okay, I wasn't vegetarian, but somehow reading it, I knew that, oh, if I really want to be spiritual, these are going to be important things that I do, that I surrender to. Oh, no more intoxication. And I was like, they were all painful. Everything I was reading the first time, I was thinking, oh, this too I might have to do. Because I felt somehow within the sound, within the words, this person is a surrendered soul to God, and that's all that they're really communicating. Surrender to Krishna. And you'll actually be joyful. And then you'll also want to carry on the Lord's mission, which is to serve compassionately to others, for others. So the spiritual communication of a pure devotee, it's actually unfathomable, but its power is that it draws us back, irresistibly draws us back to the lotus feet of Krishna. That's what's within the vibration, within the sound. And if we start to open to that, then we'll feel ourselves being drawn into that same divine energy. And then we become instruments of compassion for Krishna as well. So I realize it's like a very high topic. It's beyond me, but I at least feel inspiration to share something about it so we can see what it actually means and how unfathomable it is, spiritual communication, but how beautiful, how profound. It's our highest potential. It's possible. It's actually possible. We have examples of people who live it, and it's such an inspiration. So I'll end here. We have a few minutes left. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. That was very wonderful. But you spoke on Srila Prabhupada's prayer that he could become the instrument for the Lord's compassion, and to make him dance, right? That's very, very, very wonderful. Can you give us some tools and tips for how to communicate compassionately? Any tips or?
Communicating, mean like speaking?
Yeah, you just communicating compassionately, what are some, tips that you could give us, some tools?
Yeah, I think, we definitely, when we talked about the mode of goodness, compassion, a few of those tips came up, but just to maybe share them again, or maybe share a couple new ones. Well, the, assertiveness is something that I find very valuable for myself to speak, in other words, to express what's really going on for me. I have more tendency of withdrawing. When I look into my certain tendencies that I have with communication, sometimes
Ghanashyam Prabhu, we're having a little difficulty with
what's the big deal?
you're breaking up.
Ghanashyam Prabhu, can you hear us? I don't think.
But it doesn't matter. Communicate.
He got bumped off.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any comments or discussion points while he's trying to get back on?
Maybe Mahavishnu Priya can give us something, what she took from.
My comment was, oftentimes it's not the words that we're saying, but being fully present, and it's our intention of wanting to serve, or wanting to understand, or wanting to hear, wanting to help in any way that we can. And praying, I guess, praying for the for Krishna to guide us in helping this person and in being with them. Can you hear me?
Yes, and
we
it's
can.
very becomes very apparent to the person you're speaking with if you're not fully present.
Yeah.
You've got your cell phone and you're doing things on it, or you're looking here and there, and or you're looking at your watch. Your intention definitely comes through, and so you lose that connection, that communion that he was talking about at the beginning.
Yeah.
Madhu.
Yeah, I actually have. I was gonna ask him, and it seems to me like from what he was, from the story he was sharing, that about his way of empathy to that guy in the hospital, and then also from the example he gave about suicide and how he brought to mind, how we can all bring to mind the feelings connected with this. That kind of basically the suffering is the same, or it's the same for everybody, whether the circumstances are different. And then what I kind of trying to see here, how when we're not, it seems to me like kind of a high level, because I mean, I don't know if the higher level, but many times we are so disconnected from our own experiences in life, then that we cannot really bring to mind such experience, or definitely don't want to meet with those feelings, with those negative feelings. So in such a situation, we won't probably be able to really be present and really be communicating with the other person. So I guess like I would like to know if you have any suggestions of how can we develop that connection, since of basically how to communicate with ourselves before we can really communicate with someone else.
I want to hear more about compassionate communication. I want to be able to be more proficient with it, to not be so afraid of my own feelings that I'm experiencing when I'm working with others. I used to be afraid to bring up suicide when I was counseling with women who'd been abused and were victims. And every time I did say, are you thinking of suicide? They were so relieved. It was like a big weight was lifted. Like, oh, we can talk about this? So that was a big surprise for me. I was hesitant and afraid, but they were just welcoming. They welcomed the opportunity.
Okay. Yeah, that's what we had Rambaru Prabhu speak on suicide last month or a few weeks ago. And she was mentioning the same thing. It's people are afraid to say the word even and to talk about it. But actually these people are waiting for somebody to come and talk so they can start pouring out their heart. And often that's all they need to get over that feeling of maybe doing suicide. Does anybody else have any reflections or points that they'd like to talk about?
Okay, so he's here.
Oh, he's here. Okay, thank God. Thank Krishna. Okay.
Sorry, everyone.
Oh, there you are. Good.
Yeah, we've been missing you. So tell us.
I don't know what.
That's okay.
Communication broke down.
Yes. So please pick up where you left off. Do you remember where you left off?
Oh, me?
Yes.
Not so much. I think I was pretty much done.
Okay, so there were some questions. Surit, can you ask your question, please?
Yeah, I was asking, I was referring to your story in the beginning, and how you, once you kind of connected to how it feels, you could communicate with him. And then you gave the example of suicide, that if we can all probably could connect to something. So I think I've heard you saying basically that the suffering is the same, whether the circumstances are different or the externals are different. But I wonder, so also what I get in is that you basically need to communicate with ourselves, or to be able to do that connection with ourselves and be familiar with those things in ourselves to be able to communicate with someone else. And many times we are very disconnected from what it is for us, or kind of like been pushing those feelings for long times and don't want to even deal with them in ourselves. So how we can really do that process so we can communicate with others, if that's really the case.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, that's how it works. Like, if we can experience whatever our experience is, then we'll be able to sit with another person when they have that experience and actually be of some help, because of having, like, in other words, like, a lot of time I work with people at the end of life. So if I myself am not considering my own death, if I'm totally afraid of it, and then how am I going to be with a person who's dying and is experiencing fear? I'll just try to change it. I'll try to stop it somehow. I'll try to change the subject. I'll try to, be positive when it's really not positive, perhaps in this moment. And so it's more about what's happened because I didn't confront something within myself. How can I go there with another person? Right. So the instrument of our communication is our consciousness. That's the instrument we use. So the more I work on myself, and that's why the whole thing with the 3 modes of nature, it's really for oneself, to see how the modes act within myself. So the way, we can do this is just by, we have to separate to some degree from our minds. It's a practice to watch the mind, to watch what the mind is doing. What is the mind up to? What is my mind up to today? And maybe you do that later in the day, maybe before sleeping, you just reflect on what you were thinking throughout the day, what happened. You kind of look at it as if you're looking at somebody else. This is a practice. I've been practicing this for a long time, of actually doing this daily. And more I can see the truth that, it's not me. My thoughts are not really my thoughts. The feelings that are there, the identification is so strong that we think this is me. And the identification happens so swiftly. As soon as I feel it, this is me. But you can start to observe, start to watch those thoughts and the different feelings, and you see how different energies are acting within you. And you quickly grab it and identify with it. So it's a kind of practice, a kind of awareness of being, in Sanskrit, this is called sakshitva, to be the witness, witnesshood. This is actually coming from Vedic literature, to observe, just like we were meant to observe the body, observe the workings of the mind, observe the working of the 3 modes of nature within your mind. And then you have to feel it first sometimes. You have to feel whatever the feeling is. Like you said, we may be starting off by just trying to go to this higher level of disengaging from it in the name of spirituality. But to get there, you actually first have to feel the feeling. And then there's a possibility of separating from the feeling. So if I'm the type who just suppresses it all, then the transcendental approach of just looking at that doesn't help so much. You first have to go through the feeling of it. And then the next stage is to be able to actually detach from it. And then you start to open yourself up to really understanding what compassion means. Because compassion doesn't mean you get so involved with somebody else's life that you're yourself getting dragged down or sucking energy from you. That's not compassion. Compassion is very clean. It's like a force within you. It's radiant. You can handle anything because it's a constant flow of energy coming through you. But yeah, there are stages, and like you said, the first thing is that first experience whatever you're going through, and get in touch with what you're feeling, and admit that, and deal with that. And then there's another possibility after that of actually letting it go. I hope that was helpful in some way.
Yeah, very salient advice.
I think you actually took it from the top bottom when I was just like trying to figure out how we just connect to these feelings in the first place, while we already kind of been pushing them for so long, in the sense of, yes, we're not that highly spiritual yet, yeah. But at least at the same time, it's needs to be able to feel
Yeah.
someone else. And so how to, yeah,
yeah, you're right. I went from the top down, but sometimes that actually helps with understanding, and also it helps with doing the bottom work as well. We have to do both. We have to work from the bottom up and also from the top down simultaneously, which means we need direct spiritual practice, direct spiritual hearing, chanting. This is directly spiritual. And then we also have to work ourselves up through the modes of nature, feeling what we're feeling, go through it. So the top down also helps with being able to do the bottom work. And the bottom work helps with being able to receive the top, the energy from the top. So they work together simultaneously.
Very nice. Yeah. Mahavishnu Priya, did you want to say something you were saying earlier?
I'm glad that Surit asked that question, because I had written down recognizing influences passing through us are not us. And now I understand what he meant by that. Influences passing through us are not us. They are just feelings that are coming and going, moving. So that was clear.
That's amazing information, isn't it?
It is. It's amazing.
It really is.
we identify with our feelings, we're taught that the only real thing is feelings.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a little, I understand, sir, it's wanting to disconnect and not, not to acknowledge, not to take the responsibility for feeling bad things.
Yeah,
And there's
it's
usually,
yeah.
there's
Sorry.
usually needs hidden behind those feelings as well.
Yes.
Unfulfilled needs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Would you say that?
And to, we have to see what that is. We have to really understand the workings of our mind and also do what's necessary. Like, okay, I do have a need. I'm not going to be able to transcend this need. So let me try to get this need met in the right way, in a healthy way. What does that look like? And let me communicate that I have a need here. This is important. I can't just disregard it in the name of being very spiritual, So that has to be done too. We have to work our way up like this gradually. And if we do it in a healthy way, understanding the mode of goodness, what that means, then we'll get more and more insight of what can actually be possible beyond that.
Thank you. Any other last comments or questions before we close up for the night?
I used to always think that just reading the books, just chanting, just doing those things, I would have knowledge, spiritual knowledge bestowed upon me. I didn't realize I had to actually work at it. And now at my age, I realize it is work. It is work. It's beautiful work. It's wonderful work, but it's work.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's like, that's been my path a little bit as well, because I was so inspired by the spiritual point of view and perspective and knowledge that for, I was a brahmachari for 11 years, but at some point I also realized that, yeah, these things have to go on together. Keep taking in from above, keep taking in the hearing and the direct spiritual energy, but also now work myself up to it so I can meet it, so we can meet. When the two meet, then something happens, a transformation happens. And there are things I have to do and there's things I have to receive from the spiritual level. So, the whole mode of goodness, what it does is when you're finally in the mode of goodness, then you've created a subtle body that can actually receive the spiritual energy. The spiritual energy is so powerful that we can't even take it in our mode of ignorance, our mode of passion. We can't even handle it. Yeah. And we don't know how to receive it. It's like, but if somehow the vehicle is purified to some degree by the mode of goodness, then it's actually a worthy receptacle, worthy to actually be, so the energy can come into us and we can actually feel what true spiritual power is, what God's mercy truly is.
Well, thank you so much, Ghanashyam Prabhu, for enlightening us and an engaging discussion on compassionate communication. I really love the concept of the self-witness, witnessing yourself. Really great. I certainly learned a lot of ways how to improve communication with people, and also learned that how I talk determines whether I connect with them or turn them off. So I really need to be in contact with my own feelings before I can really be a compassionate communicator. And thank you for making that connection with Srila Prabhupada. So thank you very much. I would like to also thank all of you out there on Zoom and Facebook and YouTube for taking your valuable time to tune in. And thank you for your patience over the problems we had with the internet there. I'd like to thank Mukya Dasi, our fearless leader in Alachua here, for her continued support, and Vaishnavi Dasi, our technical support, and the End of Life team in Alachua, and also Bhakti Lata Devi for the use of her soundtrack. Thank you, and Hare Krishna, and just stay tuned for 1 second.
Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna,